Join me now and please welcome Judge Navi Pillay.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I begin with my acknowledgement of the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, and pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. This is, was, and will always be Aboriginal land, and I recognize that sovereignty was never ceded, and the fight for treaty, truth, and justice continues. So as you just heard, I'm here in Australia to receive an award from the Sydney Peace Foundation. And of course, I'm truly honored to be selected for this honor, and I highly appreciate the kind invitation to hold this dialogue with you. So I'm not only here to receive the Sydney Peace Foundation, but it coincides with my last day at the United Nations Human Rights Council's establishment of the Commission of Inquiry on occupied Palestine, including Israel and East Jerusalem. And you know, really, I got mixed up signals on what exactly I'm speaking to you about. So a bit about myself, you know, what makes me think I know something about the subject of women, peace, and justice, and a little also about the commission, because that just happened. So our last date, Chris Sidoti and I, where's Chris? Oh, there he is. So Chris Sidoti, your best export from Australia to the world. They told me at first, you know, Chris, you don't know this, but people did tell me he has a very bad temper. So he never showed that side of him, and we worked well together close to 5 years now. So I'm very interested in talking about the work of the Commission, and particularly its last effort in producing a report saying that what's happening in Gaza is genocide. So that is the first time for the United Nations. So I'm particularly anxious to get there. So do clap or something if you've heard enough about what I did in my lifetime. But this visit also coincides with 25 years since the adoption of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, a landmark commitment to gender equality in conflict prevention and peace building. 30 years after the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action Achieving Gender Equality remains essential for sustainable development, economic prosperity, and peace. Despite progress, systemic inequalities persist, hindering women's and girls' full participation, leadership, and empowerment. So this is truly relevant. Out of the 7 reports we issued in respect of Gaza and Palestine, some of those reports deal specifically with sexual violence against women and children. So as the world now faces economic uncertainty, climate crises, and deepening inequality, recommitting to gender equality is critical for building a just and sustainable future. So I really congratulate this organization to give me the opportunity to focus on women, peace, and justice, because, you know, any issues relating to women is considered something you do on the side somewhere far away. It's not the most issue. What we've done now, what you have done, is put it right here in front for all of us to consider. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, alongside the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, CEDAW and other international women's rights framework remain crucial guiding instruments. However, delivering on these commitments requires urgent reforms, renewed investment, and robust accountability mechanisms. Some of us, at least 70 women who were formerly Under-Secretary Generals at the United Nations, together with some foreign ministers, retired foreign ministers, have formed a group called GWL, Global Women Leaders, and we addressing very carefully, we prepared a huge memorandum to present to the CSW in New York last month, spelling out again, and economic rights for women is very much highlighted there. Now, on the implementation of the Beijing Action Plan, 159 countries submitted assessments and reports. The report of the Secretary General made it evident that despite progress, systemic inequalities persist while there has been small gains, such as legislative gains. Many countries enacted laws to combat gender-based violence and to ensure equal access to education. Social and economic advances, expanding social protection systems and care services has improved maternal health, education, gender gaps in primary and secondary education have narrowed globally. So instead of once again repeating the sad story, the women suffer the most, they are the poorest, we should acknowledge these gains, and done because of pressure on governments mainly from civil society. The list for persistent challenges, of course, is much longer. To name a few on the list, underrepresentation in top political, economic, and corporate fields, underinvestment in women achieving gender equality in developing countries requires $6.4 trillion annually, yet funding gaps remain vast. The backlash against gender equality, while misogyny, violence against women's human rights defenders, and the rollback of gender-sensitive policies threatened hard-won gains. So these are very serious developments coming from the pushback on rights gained by women. Gender-based violence, nearly 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical and or sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. Disproportionate impact of crises, climate change, conflicts, and economic instability disproportionately affect women and girls, deepening vulnerability. So when we're talking about the rights of women, it's this global picture we should have in mind. A strong political declaration from CSW, the Committee on the Status of Women, which is a state body, was called for by global women leaders' voices, that's us, an organization, as I said, constituted by more than 70 plus former UN women USGs and former ministers, of which I am a member. One of the useful things about this body is we know the inside of the United Nations. We know how states think. We know where the pushback is coming from and how it builds up with state after state. For instance, one of the pushbacks in many of the resolutions that are coming on now is where the states want the language inserted subject to sovereignty. So, okay, we'll agree to this resolution that there shouldn't be reprisals against human rights defenders, but subject to our sovereign right. So I see that as a real obstructive term, put in there with motions, with the intention of not complying with the resolution. So it looks so innocuous that all they want is the words subject to sovereignty, but the alarm bells are that more and more states are supporting the insertion of that clause. So as I said, I have retired as chair of the United Nations, it's got a big name, United Nations International Independent Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. But I am committed to work with the GWL, the women leaders, and other non-profit bodies on women, peace, and justice. I do have a lifetime of experience in growing up in apartheid South Africa, where you begin as a child thinking, yeah, there is something wrong with you, you are inferior because you have the dark skin, and the parents warn you out of fear, don't try to be like the whites, you're not. You know, I was working on something the other day about all the prejudices I faced when I tried to become a lawyer. And 3 of them from white firms was, we can't have white secretaries being given instructions by a black person. And secondly, well, so you're married, what if you have children? So that's the gender discrimination. And thirdly, class discrimination. Well, is your father a rich man? Will you bring us business? These were the obstacles to us. And then I looked at what Mandela faced in 1941 when he became a candidate attorney, and he writes in his book that he was told by these friendly lawyers at that law firm who were prepared to take on a black candidate attorney, but told him, you must know your place. If you want to succeed as a lawyer, you must know your place. And that the teacups that are in the office are there for the white staff. He must bring his own tin mug. That's a standard for blacks. And I thought, well, almost 25 years later, when I tried looking for a post as a candidate attorney, there it was, the same discrimination. So do you blame us as we've struggled under apartheid when I also thought apartheid will not end in my lifetime? But it did, mainly due to the collective action of civil society all over the world. Even today, I meet adults who were children at that time and said, you know, they may have been 5 or 6 years old, but they remember that they stopped eating South African oranges to respect the UN sanctions. And, you know, I found out by many questions, Chris's role when he was at high school is to stop the whites-only cricket teams. I think cricket or football, Chris? Oh, I got that wrong, yeah. That there he was. We were so inspired by footage. We didn't have TV in those days, and all this kind of news was blocked. But we heard about this and felt so encouraged that young people in Australia were helping to fight our battles to end apartheid. And they succeeded in having apartheid South Africa thrown out of the Olympic Games, the cricket union, and rugby. So I'm very grateful for any step, the tiniest step, the speech that you make as support for those who are unable in their countries to access these kinds of remedies. So under these conditions, I helped set up the Advice Desk on Violence Against Women in Durban in 1987, and it's still run by volunteers at the university there. And I co-founded Equality Now, and that's an international women's organization on equality for women based in New York, still functioning and doing very well. And I also served on the Women's National Convention in South Africa. That was very exciting. It was 1990, and all of us were encouraged to think about our new constitution, the democracy that is coming in 1994. So I'm happy to say it was the women who got together first. I had my own prejudices. I didn't want to go. We are from Durban, just like Sydney. We are from Natal. Even now we're excluded from many things. Tourists come, they go straight to Cape Town, and they overlook Durban. So it was other women who approached me and said, you have to attend this national coalition, otherwise our province will be excluded. What were my reasons and reluctance is because I didn't want to sit at the same table with the Afrikaner women, because previously they would not want, women had minority status under law, as you did, the British common law system. Yeah, the Afrikaans women didn't want that changed because they didn't want to hurt their husbands. And of course, they believed in skin discrimination. They believed in the inferiority of black people. They quoted the Bible, that the only jobs we are fit for is hewers of wood and drawers of water, laborers from the Bible. So I thought, well, why would I want to sit with those people? We won't get anywhere. But we did, all of us with disparate opinions. I chaired some of the meetings. And that means suddenly when you chair, you have to be absolutely fair, make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So your ordinary rules and principles apply, whether you one day sit as a judge or not. The fairness is how we conducted this. We drew a document. I should tell you, as soon as we went there, we drew the document, meaning we, the lawyers, and then I soon realized how much we were hated by other women, because we really thought we knew everything, that we should draw a document from the top and impose it down. Not so. So I learned many lessons. It's a questionnaire where we consulted everybody, all the women. We didn't touch certain subjects such as abortion and polygyny. Would you believe it? So some women, they believed in their husbands having multiple spouses. They didn't claim the same right for themselves, but they couldn't understand women like us who were stuck with just one man, and they felt that was hard work. This way they get time off. So you see how far we were from each other's thinking. And what did we do? We didn't impose it. It was quite a majority, mainly African women, who believed in just leave them with their cultural rights. So traditional rights are in our constitution, but we very smartly put in the equality clause in the constitution, which meant you can never override the equality clause with your traditional practice. I mention this because that was pioneering work. We learned to respect each other. We learned to compromise, leave out stuff, and to my absolute pleasure, that became the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, the document that we had drafted. I didn't play a key role. I don't want to claim that I did, but I did learn from that. And I also want to now jump to say I first began as a judge on the Rwanda Tribunal. President Mandela nominated me. In fact, he nominated me as the first woman of color in an acting position as a judge. And then he called me. And the woman said, hold on for the president. And I thought, yeah, it's probably my brother playing the fool. I don't know what I said, but definitely I lost my voice right through. It was him. I think he used to get up at 5 in the morning, apparently. So he woke the whole world up. This was like 8 in the morning on a weekend. And he congratulated me on the acting judge appointment. And he said, it gives me great joy. I hope it'll become permanent soon. You know what immediately struck me? He didn't say, no, you have to really behave, do your work properly, I'm trusting you. None of that. Only that it gives him great joy. So you can bet that I'll never going to let him down on that trust that he placed in us. It meant going out of the country. It saddened me. First, I wanted to play a role in democratic South Africa. I was telling some people I was talking to here that then I was convinced, all right, just go to Arusha, that's where the tribunal was. Just go there and you can just resign after a short while. So that's what motivated me to go there. I stayed for 8.5 years because I heard witnesses, mainly women, talk about their horrendous experiences in that Rwandan genocide. If you ask a witness, well, how many members of your family were killed, they'll answer 400. So the whole village is a family. Some of those witnesses said, we came here to see justice being done. Such a reminder of why you are put there and what your job is. It's not about you and your own discomforts. That's why 8.5 years later, and creating the world's first judgment on genocide, and making rape and sexual violence crimes, and in their case, crime of genocide, because the Tutsi women were targeted for killing and destruction of the future of that Tutsi group. So we found all that in the evidence. We didn't just invent it, and found that rape and sexual violence in those circumstances also constituted genocide. So that was the world's first, and as you know, it's very difficult to be writing something for the very first time. Particularly, I must confess to you, not one of those judges had done anything on international law. Universities were not teaching international law. So we got our first lessons there in Arusha from the Red Cross. So someone knew about international law. We didn't make this too public, of course. We're supposed to be the judges who ought to know that law. I would say both South Africa and Australia are at this moment confronting huge problems over the unconscionably high incidence of gender-based violence, of rape and killings of women, especially that perpetrated by intimate partners. There is a real problem with misogyny demonstrated by how women in leadership positions are treated implicitly or explicitly. You've provided one of the world's worst examples. Julia Gillard's famous speech to Parliament remains valid, sadly, even today. I had the honor of meeting Julia Gillard when she was Prime Minister. I came here as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And it was such a good meeting with her because she heard me out fully, even though I was making unpalatable accusations to her on the treatment of migrants and refugees here. I can't say that all the meetings with the other ministers went as that well, but she was in a position, yes, nobody knows this, but when I was retiring, the High Commissioner is supposed to draw a list of names and give it to the Secretary General on who we think are suitable candidates for High Commissioner, and I put her name down there. So I'm sorry that the UN was not ready for a person like Julia, so she didn't get to follow me. I also had the pleasure on my last visit of being received by now retired Governor-General Quinlan Bryce, and I marveled at her expert knowledge of world events. And I regard as my close friends and my role models Justice Elizabeth Evatt and Judge Hilary Charlesworth, who now sits as a judge on the International Court of Justice. I served there as ad hoc judge in the matter brought by the Gambia against Myanmar. Gambia didn't have a judge from their country, and they nominated me, and I accepted. And I see Hilary regularly. I think it's so important a judge with those kind of qualifications sits on that court rather than former ambassadors. I mean, no insult to ambassadors. Our ambassador from South Africa is here. No insult to you, sir, but really you think you're qualified to sit as a judge? So some countries think that they do. So, I played a role there too after I got entry into that court to see what's happening. So 5 of the judges, when I joined 3 or 4 years ago, were former ambassadors, Russia and China being examples. Oh yes, and I also meant to share with you that on October 3rd, Last month, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, launched the third global report on SDG 16, the Development Goal 16, which is on peace, justice, and inclusion. A deep dive into how far we have come towards building peaceful, just, and inclusive society. So despite some gains, his report says, not a single target under Goal 16 is fully on track. In 2024, at least one life was lost every 12 minutes amid armed conflicts. Armed conflicts can derail progress towards peaceful societies. This is why we're so concerned about armed conflicts and the long-term suffering it inflicts, particularly on women and children. Now, more recently, 6 days ago, in fact, I delivered the report of the UN Independent Commission of Inquiry on Palestine and Israel. We delivered it on the 28th October. This report included an excerpt of our report that we made public in Geneva on the 18th September 2025, in which we determined that Israel's action in Gaza as genocide. And of course, you on the outside wouldn't understand the sense of all these, but there are all these rules, and the rules are that we are mandated to deliver 2 reports, one in Geneva, one at the United Nations General Assembly, and they must be limited to 8,000 words. So, thanks actually more to Chris and the entire team, we devised this way of preparing a conference room paper, which was 80 pages. It took us almost 2 years because we were checking and verifying all the evidence that we had. So actually our genocide paper is, strictly speaking, a conference room paper. You may not find it on the Human Rights Council website, but it is on our website. And then on 22nd October, the International Court of Justice delivered its advisory opinion in response to the request from the UN General Assembly on Israel's obligations in the OPT. Each time the Commission's reports were presented before the General Assembly, we drew their attention to the significance of presenting these reports before the same body that adopted Resolution 181 almost 75 years ago, recommending the establishment of a Jewish state and an Arab state side by side. So we took the opportunity. You were General Assembly who passed that 75 years ago. And yet you implemented just one half of that resolution and not the other. This, followed by numerous other resolutions, stands as a reminder of the responsibility of the United Nations and its member states to ensure a just solution for the situation in Israel and Palestine that respects and protects the human rights of all people, including the right to self-determination. These resolutions are also a stark reminder of one of the main roles of the United Nations, namely to ensure that international law is fully respected and that those found to be violating its core principles are held to account. So we do claim credit for the fact that the General Assembly then asked for the opinion of the Advisory Council on what are the root causes of this conflict. So that comes from our commission. When we urge the GA, for all these reasons, we think you should get an opinion. And, and I too marvel that it's only being done 75 years after the event, even to get an opinion from the court, their court, the state's parties' courts. So that was done, and we now have this advice from the Advisory Council that the occupation itself is unlawful. Many of you are looking at the ceasefire agreement initiated by the United States, so notice that it doesn't mention anything about the occupation, which the court said is unlawful. So that's there, interpreted by the court, and which we say is the root cause of the conflict. That's just one of the failures of this ceasefire agreement. These resolutions are also a stark reminder of one of the main roles of the United Nations, namely to ensure that international law is fully respected, and that the United Nations helps us all by setting these guidelines well ahead. The reports of our Commission underscore the reality of the current situation, that after 58 years, Israel is treating the occupation as a permanent fixture and has, for all intents and purposes, annexed parts of the West Bank while seeking to hide behind a fiction of temporariness. We stated that this permanence and the annexation of land, including the purported de jure annexation of East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, have all led us to conclude that Israel's occupation is now unlawful. And we further concluded that some of the policies and actions taken by Israeli governments may also constitute categories of international crimes, including the war crimes of transferring directly or indirectly part of one's own civilian population into occupied territory, and the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer. So let me assure you, all that we as the commissioners did was to remind people of the law, a law that has been adopted by states themselves. So we're not inventing this. The law itself said annexing lands or bringing in settlers is unlawful under international law. Now, over the years, member states in the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council have been consistently briefed on the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including on specific incidents of violations committed by Israel and other duty bearers. With impunity, there are the independent experts that we call special rapporteurs. And thanks to the courage of brave journalists, I'm so happy to see some of you here, and NGOs, we are all witnesses to the carnage in real time on our TV screens. I think my time is coming to a close, so I'm going to conclude just to emphasize again that that's the beauty of civil society demanding accountability, set up the institutions, have people charged, refer them to the International Criminal Court. So the present war in Gaza that raged for 2 years now, from October 7th, 2023 to the present, is the period we are covering for the genocide. 65,000 Palestinian civilians killed, including women and children. So, and it was all shown live on our TV set, so nobody can say we didn't know what was happening. No Australian parliamentarian could say we didn't know what was happening. You know, that was the defense the Nazis put up. They didn't know what was happening. That is what some South African whites said. We didn't know things were so bad. We didn't know torture was happening. So I don't want to review the report itself on how we came to this conclusion, but we followed UN rules. We followed the test for genocidal intent by looking at what the ICJ says we must do, which is it must be the only reasonable, foreseeable inference from the act itself. We've set out many acts that you yourself, reading the act, looking at the statements of the leaders in Israel, because their statements indicate the policy and intention in carrying out these attacks. So after extensive investigations, we concluded that Palestinians throughout the West Bank are subjected to a coercive environment, the demolition of homes and destruction of property, and extensive use of force by security forces, mass incarceration, settler violence. We've highlighted all of this in our most recent report that we delivered on October 28th before the General Assembly. And I think that most of you are following these events, but it's very important for you to have this report, what UN calls a tool, which sets out facts that have been verified by us. So I don't want to recall all our previous reports. Proud, I said, of the advisory opinion, and we all now wait for the final ruling of the ICJ on whether there is genocide being committed there or not. I do know that Israel asked for time, and they have time until February to file their responding papers. In case you're wondering why it's taking so long, that's what's going on there. We give you percentage of female fatalities, that it has doubled in comparison to the escalation of hostilities in Gaza of 2008. So doubled. We can't ignore something as serious as this. So that's my brief report to you. I was combining both my personal life to show that there's some authenticity in me claiming the right to speak to you about matters that you know of already. So I said, well, I do have this background and experience, and my promise to everyone is, yeah, we're not going to disappear. We're going to continue fighting as long as there are human rights violations. Thank you very much for... Somebody's chewing me out from here.
Thank you for that. That was absolutely fascinating. You covered so much territory, and there's so many questions. But I just kind of want to start at the beginning. You said that you must know your place, and that was growing up as a child in South Africa. You seem to have overcome a lot of barriers along the way, a lot of barriers, systemic barriers. Just how did you do it? What was within you that just kept pushing you forward? Was there something about your parents? Was there something about your upbringing? How did you know that you could overcome this?
You know, I might come up with a clever answer as an adult.
Yeah, we like clever.
Yeah, so but you like clever. But as a child, as you go up, you suffer through that. And then you resist the notion that you are inferior, that there's something wrong with you because of your color. I think every child in South Africa worked his or her way through that. The schools didn't particularly instill confidence in you. Later, you know, I think I started pretty early. By 10 or 11, I was making public speeches as if I'm an authority on how bad alcohol is for you. I did do that. I remember that speech, and I said, actually, there is something good in alcohol. It can be of medicinal use. And there was a guffaw in the audience. So you make mistakes, people laugh at you, and then you grow out of that. I think that apartheid has seriously damaged. We struggled. I noticed fellow Africans from other parts of Africa don't have that defensiveness. So even I, you know, before I walk into a room, I'd say, well, can we enter there? Is it all right? This is apartheid that did that to us. And then your parents were so afraid of arrest because people were arrested. Children were arrested for the drawings that they did. Schools you can never talk about the situation around you. You can talk about Greek democracy, but not that we don't have democracy. I don't know whether that gives you any particular answer, but there was nothing special about me. Each one of us became aware. And so you started defying. There were students in my high school who had posters of public meetings, and they hid them in their socks. So even though there was a search to see whether we're carrying Elvis Presley's picture in our desks, you knew to leave that Elvis's picture alone, but to hide the posters. I think we all grew up and strengthened one another. My particular answer, though, is inspired by others, and that's why Chris As a high school student, what he did, we eventually got news of that, or somebody showed us a picture of that. And so it encourages you that, you know, you're not any different from other people, that they support you. That white people are not all racist. You know, look there in Australia, they're different. They laugh all the time, the Australians.
Do we?
Yes, you do. I don't know what you're laughing at, but...
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next on Gaza, and I know journalists here will want to talk more about it, but you made the determination that it was genocide. It's now in the International Court of Justice. What are the possible consequences if Benjamin Netanyahu and the Jewish state just refuse to acknowledge that? I mean, can the court, like, what can the court do to actually make that determination real and change the status quo?
The status quo is the law. It's a genocide convention. You and I didn't write that. The states wrote it. Under the genocide convention, every state, there is an erga omnes obligation on the part of every state, whether the genocide has occurred in your territory or touches you at all, is you have the obligation, the legal obligation, not just a choice, a legal obligation to prevent the commission of genocide, to deal with the commission of genocide, and to protect against genocide. So you'll notice many people saying, including Israel, well, they will wait for the court to determine whether there's genocide occurring or has it occurred. You know, that I used to say the same thing because, you know, I was a judge. We came out first with the definition. So maybe very proprietary, I would say, yeah, wait for the court that hears all the evidence, all the arguments, and then determines whether genocide has occurred. But then you look at the Geneva Convention. How are you going to prevent genocide? The whole purpose of the Genocide Convention is to prevent. Nobody wants genocide.
Well, obviously some states do, so that's why it's genocide, right?
Yeah, but the people in those states don't want. So one has to distinguish some right-wing elements in governments, all governments. So there is that thing standing there. It's never come before the International Court of Justice except in the Srebrenica judgment. This is the first one, the application that South Africa brought. We're kind of halfway there because the court issued a preliminary order for protection, which is very sensible. If something as big as genocide is happening, the court should immediately protect in the meantime. So they call it a provisional order, a provisional determination that there are indications of genocide going. That was delivered in January 2024. That should be an immediate red flag, an immediate signal to every government, including the Australian government. You know, honestly, you don't have to wait for a court to determine whether there's genocide. You don't have to wait for a commission to issue something authoritative. Each government has to report immediately if you hear even a rumor. You have to step in, because how else would you prevent genocide? I would say to the Australian Parliament, they have a duty now to jump into this, especially after that authoritative order issued by the International Court of Justice last year, reminding every state that you have to take immediate action to prevent genocide. This is the year 2025, you know, it's not 1941, where a rich country could go and bomb 2 huge cities in Japan and get away with it. They got together, all the states, I mean, and they said never again. But the never again part is not being respected. That's the importance of our report, the decision of the ICJ. I'm here in Australia, whichever country I'm going to go to, I'm going to issue an immediate reminder to them that you have to do something now to stop genocide. We make several recommendations in our documents that apply to Australia as well. Essentially, it means now that you know genocide is going on there, and you don't have to take it from the Commission. All right, so we're an informal body. We speak for the UN, but we still are not a court of law. You don't have to wait for the International Court of Justice. You now have sufficient warning that genocide is happening there. So the Australian government, like every other national government, should do something immediately.
But what can they do? Like what?
Yeah, so sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes I wish I was in government to tell them this is what you undertook to do.
Right.
So one of it would be to pass a law. Honestly, Chris is our expert on this. He's very strong on Australia, I should say, yeah. You were kinder to South Africa when you visited there, Chris. But just immediate things they could do is set out the policy. What is Australian nation's policy towards genocide? Do you condemn it? When you see a ceasefire agreement being done and you look down the line, it says nothing about ending a genocide. Key things are missing there. Are you going to let them get away with that so that Palestinians end up once more with a false promise? So we do set out immediate things that governments can do to fulfill their legal obligations.
Okay. Our first question is from Sarah Eisen from The Australian.
Thank you so much for your address. As the chair of the UN Independent International Commission into the inquiry into East Jerusalem, your views on Israel's actions in the region the last 2 years and beyond that are very clear. I wanted to ask as well what we've seen last month. There was some vision verified by the ABC showing mass executions by Hamas and so on. This might be a question for after February and when that's handed down. But do you think this is also a matter that the UN needs to look into as well, potentially, as I said, after the February decision is handed down?
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. It always comes up, I should say, here. So the Hamas attack, in which they took hostage or captives of 1,200 Israelis who were killed, including foreigners amongst them, happened on this morning of 7th October. Our team, on their own, immediately started saving the evidence because it was disappearing as fast as it was being entered there. So I'm very happy to tell you, through the cooperation of UN security, we managed to save 95% of what happened on that day. We were the first to issue a public statement. We were at the GA General Assembly at that time on those dates. And we issued a statement on the 10th, just 3 days after the event, condemning the Hamas attacks, saying that taking of hostages is a war crime, they must return them immediately, and calling for accountability as well. So condemn them as war crimes and crimes against humanity, and they still are. We prepared a full report, and it's there, a full account. And I should tell you, even though you're in the media, that we have not stopped gathering evidence on the Hamas activities on 7th October and thereafter, because this commission tracks all violations. We are ready, actually, we're in a position to prepare a further report on Hamas and other activities that we see as violations going on there. Some of it is against Palestinians themselves. So some serious work is going on Hamas, but we cannot keep introducing Hamas to show some kind of balance between the two. I'm responding because questions have been asked of us on that.
Could I ask just one follow-up question as well, which is something that a number of people in the pro-Palestinian movement, there's a debate over this particular question, which is whether October 7 was a day of protest or a day of terrorism. That's something that the head of APAN, the Australian Palestinian Advocacy Network, doesn't say is a day of terrorism. There are a lot of different people in the movement who feel very differently about this. What do you think?
We use the same standard. when we see acts of violations of international law, we stay with the law. That's why within 3 days, having gathered some of the evidence that we had, we were able to issue a statement, that's a UN voice, saying that they are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. And as the Commission continues, I'm just alerting you that we will be able to produce verified information of other atrocities that are ongoing and affect Palestinians. These acts come from Hamas. However, we're also very clear we're not dealing with two equal partners here at war with one another. It's an oppressor on the one side and the oppressed on the other. And there are very distinct responsibilities placed on the occupier. Sorry, it's occupier and the occupied rather than oppressor and oppressed. There are very distinct requirements, legal requirements placed on the occupier. And one of it is to provide humanitarian aid. And then you see the denial of humanitarian aid, water, and so on. So it's the same standards we apply in judging Israel's action. We applied in the other. And you know, we have also adopted the language used generally that those are terrorist acts.
Thank you. I appreciate your speech.
Our next question is from Dominic Gianni from AAP.
Thank you so much for your speech. I wanted to go back to when you touched on CEDAW and ask that your response essentially that Australia launched a case against the Taliban a year ago. And under CEDAW, there's supposed to be a 6-month kind of period and then you can take it to the ICJ. But we haven't heard anything publicly since, at least in detail. So I just want to know your assessment on that, about how long it's taking, whether you have any insights, and whether you'd like to see CEDAW used in a broader context in this, the provisions that allow you to take to the ICJ. You mentioned that sexual violence against women and children are a war crime and also constitute genocide. Would you like to see that that treaty applied into contexts like, you know, the Congo, Gaza, Sudan as well?
Yes, to your last question. We're deeply concerned what's happening on my continent, and for so long. As you know, the first cases that came before the International Court of Justice, I was a judge on that court at that time, was the Sudanese leader. And South Africa came in for criticism because they didn't execute the summons that were issued against him, al-Bashir, when he was in South Africa. There's a long history to all this. It means the law applies equally to all the conflicts. On CSW, as I mentioned, that is a body of member states. And even now, that last month, this big group of global women leaders, 2 of them led by Helen Clark, former, was she president or prime minister of New Zealand?
New Zealand, yeah.
Yes, so it was her, we appointed her, and Susanna Malcora was the chef the cabinet of the Secretary General. In other words, 2 insiders led this, and their report is really dismal on how difficult it is to persuade member states to act. I'm not surprised at all that the application announced by Australia is not proceeding there. I wouldn't give them much more time. You may have to wait forever for them to take some action. If we're looking for pushback from member states, we found it there in CSW. The previous head of UN Women, Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, yes, she complained of huge pushbacks against her by CSW when they tried to move the reproductive rights of women. In other words, the whole question of abortion. So you are getting a reluctance to act. I don't know what's their problem, but they are representatives of states seated in CSW. This is why I've been calling for civil society to demand that they be given a place in these halls of the United Nations as they used to. That's where I got my first insight. President Mandela encouraged all of us, since the United Nations was very new to us, apartheid South Africa had been thrown out of the United Nations. Mandela comes along. He's not in government yet. Everybody's negotiating. But he encouraged us to attend the Vienna Conference on human rights. That's where civil society pushed for a commission on human rights at the UN to implement human rights protection. And they established a High Commissioner for Human Rights. So I value the voice of civil society in these halls where the states are sitting upstairs. They sit upstairs, civil society down in the basement, but nevertheless, they were still effective. Yeah, you'll be shocked to learn that's no longer allowed in New York. Civil society meetings are no longer allowed, and I don't know why we've been quiet about that. That's an opportunity for our voices to be heard there. I don't know whether I've answered your question. You're still standing here.
Oh, no, sorry. I'm standing to a hand.
Oh.
You did answer a lot of it. I'm just
Thank you.
wondering, in terms of CEDAW specifically, you mentioned applying it to different states. Would you like to see, is that in terms of Australia expanding it? Does it need to go through multilateral kind of people coming together, a lot of nations coming together to enforce it in some of these conflict zones?
Yeah, no, I wish I had the answers to the key question on how you get implementation. Those treaty bodies like CEDAW, they make very important recommendations. What are they doing? They're advancing protection of human rights all the time. So there's no point in framing a document adopted by the UN. It has to grow legs. That's what these experts do. I'm very much in favor of implementing their recommendations. For instance, CEDAW has come up with the age of marriage. I think they have 18, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child also. That is very, very important for my continent where children were being put into marriage. That's what I mean about developing standards. So if you're still talking about the litigation you are instituting, yeah, I don't know much about it, so I don't want to venture in. All I'm saying to you is don't drop it. Mm-hmm. See what's the next step. Go back and approach the committees.
Thank you.
Next question, Melissa Code from the Mandarin.
Thank you, Judge, for your speech today. As someone who spent her whole career working in these systems and institutions that aim to advance equality, advance peace, a peaceful society, how fit for purpose do you think the legal frameworks and institutions are, given you've already spoken a little bit about how sometimes if there's no political impetus or will, or if civil society aren't given the right forums to push back, it can just be a lot of lofty talk.
So back to the question of implementation. We've got all these beautiful laws, nice language, all the tools. They're not being implemented. Why? Because the rights holders are us, the duty bearers are states. And they have various reasons, regional loyalty, their own national loyalty, or not wishing to address the question at all. So many of them come up with decisions or statements in the UN fora that you don't even know about that goes against your own law. I was able to do a speech for University of Stellenbosch, because they asked me to, on how many ways in which South Africa has gone against our own constitution by adopting the positions it did at the UN. And people, the large gathering was so shocked. They didn't know that our government was saying and doing these things outside there. So one, do follow what's going on. Thirdly, understand why politicians behave the way they do. The whole of Europe, for instance, vote as one. This is Europe's position. You know, this is not my country's position, but we have to follow the European Union. And then I would say, but you're going against this convention that Europe has adopted. It's the constant struggle. You know, I would say to you, after very many years, civil society is winning. We're breathing on them, we're getting our changes, slowly and step by step. I've said I've learned all my lessons from other women. I've seen them so active. With myself, I saw the sense of using the apartheid legal system. I mean, God forbid, who thinks you can get any kind of justice under the apartheid laws? It just seemed impossible. You know, I'm at an age now where I can tell a lot of stories. Do I have time to just say this one? So we have, so I'm just completing that answer for you to say the things we tried in South Africa. I didn't mean we knew it all. And that is use those very laws to crack open and get some relief. And this was a case where my clients landed on Robben Island prison, and they didn't know what's their rules and regulations. And one of them was sentenced to 6 months spare diet and isolation. I go there, I'm not supposed to talk about prison conditions, only about their appeal. But they were only interested in talking about what's happening to them. And so they wanted an application to be brought in court, spelling out what are their rights and responsibilities. They warned me that Nelson Mandela had asked them to tell me not to bring any action in the apartheid courts because you're going to lose. Don't expect any relief from an apartheid court. And the ceiling will come down and you have no further relief, that he preferred to negotiate. I was very young, in my 30s. I came back and I went to consult senior lawyers. The beauty of it is senior lawyers, all white male, but they saw me easily because a legal problem challenges any lawyer. Should we bring this application? How to go about it? And I'm thinking now I should have referred to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we knew so little about international law. So what did we do? We relied on common law. That under common law, when an inmate is in prison, the prison authorities have no right to sentence him to further penalties. If they broke a prison rule, there has to be a trial. They have to bring a magistrate from mainland Cape Town and hold a trial, in which case the inmates had a right to a lawyer. Now, they didn't have any of that, and I did bring that application, won it, with costs against the prison. I say with some satisfaction, we got it with costs. So the court spelled out that they are prisoners, but they have rights, and they have a right to a lawyer if they are alleged to have broken any regulation. And you know, we went there on any excuse to see them. So many of them suddenly wanted to draw wills, so they needed to see a lawyer. But now we don't have to adopt those subterfuges. The court spelled this out. They had a right to study. They said that's the only way they survived. These are all intellectuals. They needed books to read and study. You know, I never asked President Mandela why he chose me to be the first woman of color. Well, it's because of that application. He never saw me, but they all benefited overnight from that application. I was too young and immature, couldn't do it myself. I needed to hear from senior lawyers whether I should or shouldn't. So what I'm saying in answer to the last question, we did try in South Africa to bring cases under that law, hoping you'll have a good magistrate, and we established rights. We did what we could. And that is my message, you know, just look for the cracks and try. I think you have the next question.
Our final question is from Nick Stewart from Ability News.
Less than 20 kilometres from here, there's a company that's manufacturing military equipment that is intimately involved with the Israeli defence complex. We have a number of people being arrested this morning protesting against the intimate engagement that Australia has with Israeli defence technologies. Our Deputy Prime Minister is improbably also Defence Minister and has defended Australia's relationship with our defence companies and their relationship with Israel. What do you say to his claims that we're not supporting the Israeli military complex?
There are ways in which they do support. You know, you could be manufacturing a part that is used as part of a gun or a rocket. That's all contributing to that effort.
So you're saying that Australia is effectively contributing, directly involved with the Israeli military complex?
I would issue a firm warning to them, be careful what you're doing, because you may one day face charges of complicity in genocide.
Wow. And on that very powerful ending, before we thank Judge Pillay, I would like to give her a gold card to the National Press Club of Australia. You don't have to drink wine while you're here, but you're welcome to. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.